The morning air was crisp, the soft hum of cicadas blending with the distant sounds of sprinklers kicking on in nearby yards. The neighborhood was still quiet, most people still inside, enjoying the last moments of sleep before the day fully began. I had been outside for a while now, working through my stretches, letting the tension in my muscles slowly unwind. The warmth of the sun was just starting to press down, heating the pavement beneath my feet. As I reached my arms over my head, tilting to the side in a slow, practiced motion, I hadn't realized I wasn't alone. A slight shift in the air, the faint scuff of sneakers against the sidewalk. I turned my head just slightly, just enough to see movement at the edge of my vision. My neighbor's son. He stood just outside his front door, stretching his own arms over his head, his eyes locked onto me with an expression that sent a quiet shiver up my spine. "Morning," he said, his voice low and edged with something I couldn't quite name. I exhaled, shifting back into my stance, offering a small nod. "Didn't see you there." A slow smirk. Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten, an awareness settling in my chest that hadn't been there before. I should have looked away, should have focused back on my breathing, my movements, but I didn't. Instead, I held his gaze just a second longer than necessary before dropping into my next stretch, bending at the waist, letting my fingertips graze my toes. The soft pull in my hamstrings was a familiar ache, grounding, but I was hyper-aware of the way his gaze hadn't left me. "Didn't know you did yoga," he mused, stepping closer, his tone casual. "I don't," I murmured, straightening slowly. "Just stretching." He nodded, his gaze flickering down my body and back up again. "Looks intense." I smirked, rolling my shoulders. "You wouldn't last 5 minutes." His brows lifted slightly, something flickering behind his eyes that sent a slow ripple of heat through me. "That a challenge?" I scoffed, shaking my head. "Not unless you're up for embarrassing yourself." He chuckled, stepping onto the pavement, closing the distance between us just slightly. "Try me." The shift was subtle but undeniable. The easy teasing energy between us had thickened, stretched into something heavier. My pulse ticked up, though I kept my expression neutral, unwilling to acknowledge the quiet pull between us. "All right then," I murmured, stepping back, gesturing to the mat. "Let's see what you've got." He didn't hesitate, just moved beside me, his confidence easy, effortless, like he had been expecting this all along. I watched as he mirrored my stance, rolling his shoulders, preparing for whatever I threw at him. I should have kept things simple, should have eased him into it, but something about the way he watched me made me want to push him. I shifted into a deeper stretch, one that required balance and control, my body curving into a slow, fluid motion. His gaze flickered lower just for a second, his jaw tightening slightly before he adjusted his stance to follow. "Not bad," I murmured, watching him struggle slightly. He exhaled through his nose. "Not done yet." The words sent another quiet shiver through me, a slow awareness settling between us, unspoken but undeniable, and suddenly, the morning air didn't feel so cool anymore. I moved into another stretch, lowering myself into a deep lunge, letting my body flow through the motions I had done 100 times before. But this time, I wasn't just stretching. I was aware of every movement, every shift of his eyes as he followed my lead. "Still with me?" I asked, glancing over at him, my voice laced with challenge. He smirked, adjusting his position. "Starting to think you're just showing off." I chuckled, shaking my head. "I don't need to show off." His gaze flickered to my legs, the way they moved, the way my body bent effortlessly into each stretch. He swallowed, his smirk faltering for just a second before he rolled his shoulders, forcing himself to focus. "I can handle it," he murmured. "We'll see." I pushed forward, shifting into another pose, my muscles burning slightly, but I barely felt it. The heat was different now, not from the sun, not from exertion, it was from the way he was looking at me, from the way I could feel his eyes on me. He stepped a little closer, adjusting his stance, his breath coming just a little quicker now. "Okay, maybe this is harder than I thought." I smiled. "Told you." His eyes lingered on my lips for just a second before flicking back up. "So, what's my reward if I make it through this?" I arched a brow. "Your reward?" A slow grin. "Yeah. You said I wouldn't last 5 minutes. If I do, I think I deserve something." I tilted my head, pretending to consider. And what exactly do you think you deserve? He hesitated, but only for a second. I'll let you know when I win. Something about the certainty in his voice made my stomach tighten, my pulse ticked up, but I kept my expression smooth, letting the moment stretch just a little longer before I turned away, moving into my next position. Let's see if you can make it that far first. The smirk never left his lips, and somehow, I already knew he wasn't going to let me win this one. The seconds stretched heavy and slow as the sun climbed higher, casting longer shadows across the pavement. The warmth that had started as a soft embrace was now something more, a pressing heat against my skin made worse by the way he watched me. My breath was steady, my muscles tight as I shifted into another stretch, pushing myself just a little further, testing both my own endurance and his. He was still beside me, still following, still holding onto that cocky smirk that made something coil tight in my stomach. How's that 5-minute mark looking? I asked, glancing over at him, my voice smooth, teasing. He exhaled, rolling his shoulders before mirroring my pose. I'm not even close to tapping out. I chuckled, shaking my head. Stubborn. Persistent. The word hung between us, heavier than it should have been. He was too close now, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him, close enough that every shift of his muscles, every controlled inhale felt amplified in the quiet of the morning. I swallowed, exhaling slowly as I moved into a standing position, rolling my neck, shaking out my limbs. Fine. You win. His smirk deepened. Told you. I sighed, grabbing my water bottle from the edge of the mat, taking a slow sip, ignoring the way my heart was still beating a little too fast. So, I said, setting the bottle down, what do you want? He didn't answer right away, just watched me, thoughtful, measured, like he was considering his options. Then, a rematch. I blinked, caught off guard. A rematch. Tomorrow morning, he said, arms crossing over his chest. Same time, same place. I arched a brow. You're telling me you want to wake up early to do this again? A small grin. I think you like the challenge. Something in my stomach twisted. He wasn't wrong. I did like the challenge. I exhaled, shaking my head, but there was amusement in my tone when I said, fine. Tomorrow. But I'm stepping it up. His smirk widened. Good. I was hoping you would. I turned away, gathering my things, ignoring the way my skin still felt warm, too warm. Enjoy the rest of your morning. Oh, I will. I glanced back, catching the way his gaze lingered, the way his smirk held something more than just amusement. Something told me this wasn't over, and I wasn't sure I wanted it to be.